Welcome to the show. My guest on the 7th episode of the Lunch Club podcast is Phil Hunt, co-managing director of Headgear Films, an international film distribution company, as well as the founder and managing director of Bankside Films and Bohemia Media. Are you making a cup of tea there, Phil?
I am, actually, yes.
Hello. How are you doing?
All right, pretty good. Nice to be here.
It's lovely to have you on, and I'm really pleased to get the chance to speak to you because my side of the sort of the broadcast industry is very much on screen these days. I used to do a lot of writing, but I've always been intrigued and I'll admit baffled by financing movies and TV. So could you begin maybe by walking us through your back catalogue, picking out a few highlights and giving us an overview of how it all works?
Wow. Okay, that's like a day. That's a whole day session. So Headgear is. I started out as a producer back in the 90s after I had. This was my second career. I was a photographer in the early 80s, in advertising and music, and then kind of made the slow change over into being a film producer in the kind of mid-late 90s. It wasn't working for me. After 3 movies in 6 years, I had realised that all I had earned was about £4,000. So I was like, okay, let's stop this and let's invest in people who do know what they're doing. So Headgear was born in 2001. It was myself and a friend of mine, Compton Ross, who began it, and been going 19 years as an investment company. So we do we invest about 40 movies a year. We've had, it's been quite a ride, really. For us with Headgear, the key thing is it's all about not losing money. It's not really about falling in love with the script and the story and the film itself. It's really about what makes a good deal. What are we not going to lose money on? Because there's a difference between an equity investor and a lender, and we're lenders. We're not equity investors. These days, I have to say, if you're in equity, you're going to lose your money. There's very, very little chance of you actually making money as an equity, as equity in film. So we lend basically. So that's what Headgear does. Bankside is an international sales company which is now 13 years old, and Stephen Kelleher does a brilliant job of kind of running that on a day-to-day basis. And we've had a good ride with that, and that's kind of morphed from being a sales company into a production and sales company. So it develops, it kind of helps package up with talent and bring the finance on board, and then goes to market and pre-sells it or sells it, and then shall I go on to Bohemia Media? Is that kind of or?
Yeah, go on. Let's hear about it. I'm so intrigued by how these things all interlinked, and already it seems that over the time you've been doing these various putting deals together. You've reached out and it's changed in its own way. But tell us about Bohemia Media, and then we'll come back to how things have moved on.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bohemia Media is it is basically a distribution company for movies in the UK, and North America, and then we're opening up in other territories. We're opening up early next year in Australia and New Zealand, for example. So Bohemia is actually part of a larger group of companies which I started about 3 years ago, called Bohemia Club, and the concept of that was born back in 2013. My life partner Lucy Fenton came up with this idea of buying a building in central London to make as the physical home for diversity. So what that is, it's sexual diversity, LGBTQ, cultural diversity, marginalised voices, and there's no place. There's lots of there's lots of bars which kind of mostly skew to one or another. So gay bars, queer bars, lesbian bars, etc. But there's no bars which are for everyone, right?
Yeah.
With the idea of like, if you can get people from all walks of life, so from all forms of diversity and marginalised communities, sitting around a table, telling each other their stories of who they are and their cultures, and if everyone accepts them, then eventually you get to world peace. So that was how the goal of Bohemia was born. Now Lucy and I are kind of burners, Burning Man. We go to Burning Man, and that's all about community and liberal points of view. So we were very much involved, 8 years ago, whatever, in the alternative sexual community, and kind of hanging out with them. It's this kind of Venn diagram of where LGBTQ meets, Burning Man festival goes, liberal-minded folk, tantric folk, all of that kind of mixed into one. And so we were going to these events and parties and festivals, and we realised there was a massive need in the market for a home, because it's just it's on the internet, and people kind of occasionally kind of get together in these festivals or whatever, and that's all that's all they kind of manage. There was no real home for it. So we started this place out, and the whole point of it was to purchase a building that we completely control, so no one could put the rent up or convert it into flats or anything like that. So we own outright this building in Clerkenwell, 5,000 square foot, and then the other point of it was, let's not just create a bar, let's create a whole universe there. So there's 4 floors. There's event space. There's we're just doing a massive refurbishment. There's a place in the basement which is going to be the kind of 70-80 seater performance space, that state-of-the-art performance space. We're opening up a members club, Bohemia Club membership, and then there's a bar on the ground floor. So we do events. And this will lead into Bohemia Media, but all this background is really important to understand what Bohemia Media is all about. We are not a distribution company for films. We're much more than that. So we do events such as, we do workshops, whether it's consent workshops, knitting workshops, naked yoga workshops. We do meet-up groups come there, so we have the people as niche as the kink-friendly intersectional feminists who play ukulele, meet up once a month. We have dykes on bikes. We have polyamorous men's groups, polyamorous women's groups. We have bi discos, gay discos, queer discos for the over 40s. We have cabaret, we have drag. We have talks, the Apple Seeds Talks once a month, which is all about how to put an hour of your time into making the world a better place. So the last one that we had pre-COVID was about loneliness in London. So there's a whole, as I say, kind of universe of things that go on there. It's not just a bar. So Bohemia Media is about expanding those stories outside of the building, outside of London itself.
This is music to my ears, because there's so many pockets of virtual ways, as you say, in which coming together and being in love with one another is it happens, and it's great to see it online, and it's great to see it popping up, but to actually have a home for it, I've not come across that before. And I've got great friends actually who love Burning Man and actually organise it. And I was in Vegas with them filming years ago, and it's my lasting regret in life that I had to get a plane home and missed it, and I was really gutted. So I'll see you there at some point in the future.
Oh, yeah.
However, I think it sounds to me, well, first of all, I want to come pour some wine for you at Bohemia. It sounds like an event we should do, and see how effective we can go with that.
Yeah.
But also, I'm glad to hear it, because it's sort of it does tie in with why we watch things, why we engage with stories, but it takes it into a very real and tangible place. And that's why I love what you're saying, because stories and films, in isolation in the theatre or the cinema or on telly or online, they're great. But what happens afterwards, it feels like they're a sort of link in a massive gap. Whereas this sounds like you're starting a movement. Were you always like that growing up? I mean, when you were a photographer, was that who you are?
Yeah, so so I was 11 in 1978 when I heard The Clash.
Oh man!
And then, it was kind of like almost like being born again.
Yeah.
Suddenly, my life changed, and I sought them out, and I was like, okay, so this is a movement that I want to be part of. And eventually I kind of met The Clash and the Pistols. And by the age of 16, I was working for Big Audio Dynamite, which was the, Mick Jones's band after The Clash. And I spent my youth traveling around the world, doing the kind of sex, drugs and rock and roll.
Hang on, this is awesome. But how did you get from just hearing them to meeting them?
Well, here you go. Because if you want something, just go and get it. And that's the whole thing. Is like when Lucy said, hey, why don't we create a home? We just come back from this kind of 4-day mini festival where everyone was kind of, it's pretty hedonistic, but everyone was really connecting. And then we were walking on Hampstead Heath and like everyone's eyes were on the ground and no one looking at each other. And we just thought, well, sod this, so let's go and make it happen. So that, back then it was like, well, this is what I want, so let's go after it. And so eventually I went to the loads of Clash gigs, and then stood by the back door before a gig, got let in as they did, and started meeting them, and slowly wormed my way into that sect of people, punks, and this is why, so everyone in Bohemia, the organisation of Bohemia, from Bohemia Club to Bohemia Utopia, which is a charitable organisation that we have, Bohemia Egomania, which is the talent management and mentorship program, and Bohemia Media and other aspects of Bohemia that we're opening opening up. It's like, well, everyone in those organisations are all authentic, and that's what Bohemia Media is. It's a film distribution company, but everyone is LGBTQ. I'm the only, I suppose, non-LGBTQ, but I'm an ally of, right? And the whole point, the connection between punk and LGBTQ is very close. Going right back at the dawn of punk, all the punks just hang around the gay clubs because they're outcasts of society. I feel that I've always been on the edge of society and loved hanging out there because that's more interesting. That's really more interesting. That's where I get my energy and drive from in life. It's like, hey, look at all these, outcasts, brilliant.
Yeah.
So when Lucy and I were attracted to that kind of whole movement, and then Lucy found the other side of her sexuality. She discovered she's bisexual. I tried kissing a guy or two, didn't really work for me, but I loved being part of that movement. So the whole, punk is, let's go back to the nub of what punk was about rather than the kind of early 80s, where it became a little bit more grungy. The nub of punk is about embracing diversity. It's a very female-led movement.
And it's a time now where these ideas are thankfully becoming, more and more attention is being given to them, and rightly so. Yeah. But I think you're right about the fringe thing. And the fringe, I think the appealing thing for me about the fringes of all things is that it's constantly on the move. There's always something. There's always a new frontier. And we're living in an age now where we're presented with obviously a unique set of circumstances. We're recording this, during the sort of second wave of the pandemic in the UK, but also the backdrop of the past decade. I mean, the change, which is welcome, has been enormous, not just in our industry, but in our society. But we've got, it's baby steps. We all would admit we have a very, very long way to go. But I'm super encouraged to hear this. What are the plans for Bohemia, when we get back to some semblance of normality?
So we closed the pub, like with all the other pubs or venue, I should say, in March, and then we reopened mid-July, and it was like, oh shit, taking us down 80%. This isn't working. So we closed again 2 weeks ago. We were always going to do a massive refurbishment program on the building, and we just brought it forward. So we are spending, I mean, a massive amount of money, enough to buy the building pretty much all over again, to convert it. So as I mentioned, like the basement will be the state of the art performance space, where all kinds of performances. The ground floor will remain open to the public as the apple tree. So the pub side of it is called the apple tree on the ground floor, and then the floors above, the first and second floors, will be open for Bohemia Club membership. So we are in phase one at the moment. We're open. We just closed for a couple of months until end of November, where we'll be open while the other works will be around us, and reopen early next summer to have a fully new building with membership. I've got already a long list of people in the film industry and other creative industries who will be members. So if any of your guests would like to be a member of Bohemia Club, then it's going to be everyone's sick and tired of the kind of Ferndale Soho House type thing. It's got too busy. It's not exclusive. It's too expensive. The service isn't great. This is how Soho House used to be, although, right back in 1996 when it started, I was there at the beginning, and it was fantastic. It really was a place where you'd come and your own folk were there, and you could like have fun and make connections for friendship and for business, and it was great. So that's the kind of vibe, some of the vibe we're going to take into it, but also it's in the name, Bohemia, Bohemians, and a kind of very much updated version of that. So we're going to have the club membership, a new venue on the ground floor, the bar, and then the performance space below. We're also in R&D of a VOD platform, which will launch next year as well for Bohemia, where it will be all of Bohemia Media's distribution films on there. It will also be quite interactive. We'll be doing Q&As, etc. on that platform. We'll be streaming our events live on that platform as well. So to take it out of London, to take it out of the UK and make it a global platform, so that people can have a little bit of taste of Bohemia all around the world, and thus continue on our path of the goal of creating world peace, which of course I doubt if we'll ever get to. But as long as we can attempt to go along that path and to create change, much of which we're already doing, then that's going to be a great thing.
I think it is the absolute apex of what to aim for. There's no better goal. I mean, there's no question about it. It's the way we all have to slowly aim towards. And I think on that part, it's the path. You're right. There's never going to be a moment, probably, when we all admit we're at peace. But the path is the destination, I think. But I'm absolutely intrigued by the amount of emotional investment you have put into your work, and I love that you're living the things that really. It's kind of obvious when you think about it. The film industry, it is about connections. It is about people, and the magic of this is that people who have been marginalised and who haven't felt at the centre of things for far too long have a place to belong, and it's within the fabric of a burgeoning framework of successful business. So my hat is off to you. I want to touch on the sheer amount of money that you've invested, because this staggered me that. Headgear over the last decade has invested almost $1 billion of production in more than 300 films. That slightly blew my mind. That must be up there with the big. I mean, how have you done this? Tell me everything.
Well, I start work at about 6:30 in the morning and finish at 11 at night.
Really?
Yeah. I do. I mean, every day, certainly in lockdown. I did a bit less work, marginally less work pre-lockdown. But, this is like fun. I mean, yes, I'm spending too much time at the desk and looking at the screen, computer screen, and, 8-10 hours on the phone every day. But it's great fun. But just to clarify those figures, what do you say? $1 billion of production?
Yeah, in more than 300 films, yeah.
Yeah. So certainly more than 300 films. So we haven't invested a billion.
No.
It's been a billion of production. Yeah. Oh shit. Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's pretty epic.
Yeah.
I've got a question here actually from Phil Lawton, who's a member of the Lunch Club. Paul Lawton. I beg your pardon. Sorry, Paul Lawton, who would like to ask, what is your favourite film of all the ones you've been involved with, and which one would you deem to be the most successful?
Oh, well, okay. So I can't answer that question because, so firstly, to take the last point first, successful, define success. Mm-hmm. Do you mean critical success? Do you mean box office? Do you mean personal emotional success? Or do you mean financial success for one of my companies?
I think
they're all
totally different.
Totally different. So it's quite hard to answer that. So let me try and give you a few bits. How do I answer that? Everyone's first films are always kind of their little babies. So I have to say my very first film that I exec produced these days rather than produce, is Fast Food, made for £50,000, had Jerry Butler and a bunch of others. That's terrible, a bunch of others. I just mention him because he's the most famous. And unfortunately, and this is really unfortunate, it's something I fight against, we live in this celebrity-driven world of which I detest and hate. Anyway, so Fast Food, made for £50,000, had 37 locations in London, 7-week shoot. It was brilliant. I had so much fun on it. And it's still, I think it still, stands up today, that little film. And then probably Chunky Monkey, my second film, which was very controversial. I guess those, because I produced, and most recently, I produced a small documentary on a very close friend of mine called Don Letts, the guy who brought reggae into the punk movement. Don's a well-known DJ on the BBC, as well as plays at festivals and parties, and a filmmaker as well. Does lots of documentaries, etc. So we did a great documentary on him, and it was the first film I actually produced in about 14 years. So from a personal point of view, that from a commercial point, it's a difficult one.
Hard.
It's really, 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 really difficult. I'm going to struggle on giving those. The biggest budget one is Black Mass, the Johnny Depp movie of a few years ago. And we invested actually heavily in that and made a profit, which was great. That was great. But, there's been a lot of losses on the way as well, right? So it's not all rosy. And then the ones that I made the most IRR on, internal rate of return, is, I do bridge lending, so there's some of those. But then cash on cash, probably there's I have to say there's probably a correlation between as a lender, the more money earned is on probably the less critically successful films.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So something like Churchill, how did that work for you?
We made money on that. That was pretty good. Yeah.
It sort of feels like a bit of a bullseye, and that had good acclaim. You made a bit of money. It's a pretty hefty subject matter as well. Julie Foy would like to ask, with regard to micro-budget films, are you a fan of self-distribution, or is it better to try and recruit a sales agent and go the conventional way, or to a platform such as Prime or Netflix?
Yeah, so really important here. If you're new-ish in the business, do not ever make the mistake of putting it on Amazon PDV yourself. You will blow all value. So that's really important. Don't do it. Don't do it. Because effectively you're missing much more important cash-making windows. So do not do that. I would always suggest go to professionals. So to answer this question, it's like whatever you're looking for in life, in business, seek the people who are best at what they do. Like I kind of joke, saying, I'm a jack of all, master of none, except for one thing, which is surrounding myself with great people. Yeah. That I'm really good at. But I'm not particularly great at anything. other than having energy, drive, enthusiasm, and wanting to hang around with the great people. So therefore, if that is true, then you should seek out great sales companies, great distributors. Do not distribute yourself, because it's all about also, it's not just about knowing stuff, but it's about having great relationships. This business is so much about great relationships. Someone with a great relationship can shift a film, make money. The same film, someone who doesn't have those great relationships won't make money.
I think that's bang on. I think the entire trade revolves, exactly as you say, around a great chain of, effectively it's trust built up, isn't it, and confidence.
Yeah.
So John Wolstenholme would like to know, what are your essential criteria when choosing what to invest in?
So I'm gonna focus on the word invest. How to answer this question is I'm focusing on that word invest. So firstly, I'd like to, is it invest or is it lend? Similar kind of thing, I guess. So if the goal is how do I not lose money and ideally make money, then it's make a decision with your head and not your heart. So it's not about the script. It's not about that at all. It's about seeing what the deal is. Because I've been in films, going back to what I was just saying earlier, is that I've been in films which have got critical success, but I've lost money. Now, if I had just put a little bit less money in one basket of investment, the gap position, the performance risk, it would have been great. If the budget wasn't 10 but 8.5, which it could have been, I would have come out of that, really successfully financially, not just on a critically successful film. So what do I look at? I look at what is the deal. Now, to go into the minutiae of that is a very long conversation, so I won't go into it. But the aspects that come into that is I've been in the business for almost 25 years, and it's just all of that experience and knowledge. I see everything. I'm across, Australian, UK, American movies. I have investments in behind the scenes, by the way, in other distribution companies, sales companies, post-production companies, and production companies. And I do over 40 movies and I do about 40 movies a year in Headgear. Bankside does about 7 a year, and then Bohemia, and also my other distribution company called Yet Another Distribution Company. Between those, we're on for about 40 a year. So I'm doing about almost 100 movies a year in some capacity. So I see the whole market. So it's that evaluation that gives me the knowledge and information onto how to structure the mechanics of the deal. Who's pre-buying it? What's the what kind of genre is it? What does the gap look like? Blah blah blah. All of that factor. So what is the deal? Then of course it's also about who's the producer. Can they deliver? They're going to make something, and they need to deliver the thing in a film. So who's the producer? Then the director and cast. Obviously that's kind of a value thing. Well, the cast is a value thing, and I look at that. If the film is not delivered to a first-class theatrical standard and it misses that, then how do you fire sell it? I'm afraid, and that's going to be based on genre cast. The director, what you're looking at from the director is past performance and execution. Is the deal execution dependent or not? So if it's Mike Leigh, you know what you're going to get. It's not execution dependent really, because he's just going to do the same as what he always does, which is deliver. It doesn't matter whether you think they're good or bad films. They're the same kind of films, the same buyers. There is an audience. So that's on the director. And then, as I said, the deal, the actual structure of the deal is too complex to go into. On this interview, so that's what I'm kind of looking at.
It does sound like a web of information, and you can sort of feel.
It's really complex.
Yeah, no, I get that, but actually, it's a great insight to see how you approach that, because I think a lot of people will always just go by the mantra. It's all about the script, but fascinating to hear. It's about, from your point of view, it is entirely about a completely different set of criteria. So I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah, I'll just give you a really quick. Right. Okay. If someone's like, if someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I've got a great idea. I want to create a rival to Coca-Cola, or anything that's already out there," I'm like, "Have you done it before?" No, not really. I mean, I've got a kind of fizzy water drink machine at home. I'm like, okay, so you haven't got, really, there's no past performance. You're trying to build something. You don't know what the budget is. You don't really know where the suppliers are, etc., etc. Coca-Cola have their distribution channels all throughout the world. They've got their budget to make it has been perfected to be low as their decades has gone on. So that's a kind of, it's really difficult. There's so many permutations to it, really difficult.
It's a tough one. Ivan Chandler has a music question. In regard to music licensing for your various films, how are such rights dealt with and by whom?
Well, there are a handful of companies that will pre-buy those music rights for not too much money, but it's a nice little add-on. So sometimes they make up the finance plan themselves. That they make up part of the finance plan, and if they don't, then really it's at the producers and the producers' power and discretion to be able to sell those on. But I would say in general, to do that, you need to, again, be really knowledgeable about how to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to do that. So we just pre-sell it to one of the handful of companies that are out there that do it.
Sure. I'd love to touch, just before we bid you farewell, on two areas which just found completely inspiring in your biog. Mentoring, which I guess a lot of what you do with Bohemia, you're leading a kind of, it's not just a distribution company, you say, it's more like a social movement. So mentoring at the NFT. And I also want to ask you about the British Film Festival of Kurdistan, Iraq.
Yes. So look, mentoring's a big thing. I really love doing it because it's like, hey, look, this is, I'm 53. I've been doing this since I was 16, doing this as in working, and I have other businesses outside of what we've even discussed. So I'm like, look, let me give you a bit of a shortcut. I don't want you to make the same mistakes. And when I've got the right people being who are a sponge, who really want to learn, it's great because they've got as much excitement and energy and drive as I have, and I'm like, here, I'll give you all of this information. Go out there. I love doing that, and that's also what Bohemia Egomania is about. So it's a hybrid of a management and mentorship program. And we work with people, writers, fine artists such as Chemical X, the guy that makes art out of ecstasy pills. We've got trans actors, directors, everything, and it's just so much fun. So that is a free service. I don't charge for that at all. As the same with the charity end of what we do in Bohemia, we raise money for charities and we don't take a cut or anything. So that's the kind of mentorship, and then Kurdistan, well, okay, so how this happened was I was having a pint with my neighbour back in, 2011, I think now, who was the British Consul General of Kurdistan, northern Iraq. And kind of halfway through, it's probably towards the end of the second pint, in fact, it was like, you know what, I've never done a film festival before. Why don't I come out? You can put on the structure, the architecture of it. Why don't I come out and put a film festival on? He's like, great, let's do it. So 3 months later, I was in Erbil, got off the flight, and it was a long way. There's no direct flights to Kurdistan, so it's quite a long flight. We were met by a convoy of armoured vehicles and a whole load of mercenaries, packed. They took us off into this convoy to the British Consul General, which was this ex-hotel on the outskirts of the city on a slight hill. So we kind of got me and my colleagues that I had kind of brought onto this, including Tony James from Cambridge Film Festival, in fact, who brought in all the equipment. We brought in all the projectors, the screens, everything. There was nothing there. and Nikki Galani, who was my kind of right-hand person, kind of producing it with me. So we were brought in and then sat down in, I mean, it's out of Killing Fields or something, right? So it sat down on this kind of sofa, you know, with stuff coming out of it in this room with maps around it. And we were given a briefing as to, right, you've got, you know, 3 layers around this hotel of security, first, second, third tier. The first tier was breached earlier on today, but don't worry, you know, we haven't had anybody being killed for a month yet. I said, okay, thanks for that.
Yeah.
But it was exciting, you know. And anyway, we had a 3-day festival. The Kurdistan regional government gave us a new building, which was a conference centre. It had 2 kind of screens, not screens, but, you know, auditoriums. And we put on this fantastic festival. Everyone absolutely loved it. It was amazing. The following year, we did it again. Well, actually, sorry, during that year, then I met the Prime Minister. I then started consulting for the Kurdistan regional government to bring a film business into Kurdistan. I wrote some papers, etc., and it was all going really well. And then the following year, we put on another festival, and then we're just about to start our 3rd, and ISIS happened.
Yeah.
Which was a real shame.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful country, fantastic, beautiful people, really, really exciting. I'd love to do it again. Don't know how I'm going to fit it in my day's work at the moment. But, you know, one day.
You are incredibly busy, and I just think it feels like your life is, you know, an extraordinary blend of bringing the sort of energy and eclectic connections of a festival into the business world, and I admire you for it. I think this has been enlightening and inspiring in equal measure. So Phil, thank you so much for joining us. Do come and see us at the Lunch Club when we're allowed to finally all have lunch again.
Yeah,
it'll be a pleasure to host you.
Yeah, and could I just put a word out to say that, you know, if anybody is interested in Bohemia Media, then it's bohemiamedia.co.uk, and then also seek us out at the Apple Tree, which is our venue. And if anyone is interested in being a founder member of the membership Bohemia Club, then look me up, Phil at headgearfilms.com, or you can find me, you know.
And we will. Thank you so much. And I'm
Great.
sure
Olly,
you'll have
thank you.
plenty of people taking you up on that. Cheers.